So, hello and welcome back to our afternoon session of our inaugural FOSIL Symposium. I hope you enjoyed this morning, and if you didn't hear it, not that you didn't enjoy it, if you didn't hear it, then I hope you will listen back to the recordings because you've missed something quite special, in my opinion. This afternoon we have two speakers, two librarians who are going to be talking about their activities within schools, and there's more to come after that, so hold on to your hats. I'd like to introduce, without further ado, Ruth Maloney, somebody who I've worked with for such a long time, is a co-host on my podcast and a very dear friend. So without any more, off you go, Ruth, it's up to you.
Thank you very much. Yes, I was just, as I was waiting for this afternoon session to start, thinking about how long it is that I've been in touch with Daryl and Elizabeth. Daryl I met back in 2019, I think, or 18, when FOSIL was just beginning to get started. Yeah, it's fair to say that he has been on a far more intense journey with FOSIL than I have. And Elizabeth I have known possibly not as long, but yeah, in a different way, because we host the podcast together. So we're looking more generally at school libraries. Both of them have been a huge support to me, and very grateful to be able to have this opportunity to speak to you this afternoon. Really, the presentation is about what my experience of being a school librarian, of working with FOSIL, of inquiry, what that looks like for me as the librarian at Tonbridge Grammar School, and answering some of the questions which were put to me: why inquiry, what the obstacles are to inquiry, and how I'm engaging and empowering inquirers. So, I've decided to give this presentation following the structure of FOSIL. So it's looking at my own kind of inquiry into inquiry, which may seem a little convoluted, but bear with me, I hope it works. So first of all, I'm bound to connect with this topic. What do I already know? So what I already know is libraries. I started off in public libraries. I did a graduate traineeship at Oxford University Libraries. I've worked in law firms, and then, having had a career break for my children, decided that I would go into school libraries. It's a kind of natural move, was a natural move for me, although not one that I would have dreamt of when I first did my master's. So I know educational experience. I had a UK education. I had done an undergraduate degree. I did a postgraduate diploma. I'd done my scholar traineeship, and then I'd gone on to do my master's in information science. I really felt that I knew about education from a learning point of view. I've got two children who had been through the UK education system and are still in the UK education system, so I felt like I knew, how school was these days. What I didn't know, and what I'm very much still learning, was anything about being a school librarian. I was surprised to discover that there is no sort of conversion training, no specialism in school librarianship. I would love to be working in a country where teacher librarians were a thing. I think that would be a huge power for me. I didn't know anything about the IB. Tonbridge Grammar School is an IB school, and Daryl mentioned that when he had taught the IB, he had taught in a school where they had the NYP program, which is what are years 7 either to 9 or 7 to 11 in the UK system, and the diploma program, which is the sixth form equivalent of A-levels in the UK school. That's exactly what we have at Tonbridge Grammar School. We take this 2-year gap out for A-level for GCSEs. I didn't know anything about IFLA or the library guidelines, and I knew nothing about pedagogy. I'm not even sure pedagogy was a word in my vocabulary. So there was a lot I didn't know, and that led me to this state of wonder. What questions was I needing to ask? What did I need to understand to get started? So we're an IB school. That seemed like a good place to start. I needed to understand what their expectations were for both the NYP programs and the diploma programs. I needed to understand a bit about the UK school curriculum, I needed to think about, from an inquiry, from a library point of view, what GCSEs looked like and how they fitted into the system. I needed to think about the other requirements that the school had for me as a librarian and for the library. They hadn't had a librarian for a long time before I'd been there, and I'm not sure they'd had a professionally qualified librarian for a significant amount of time. I discovered I needed to learn about FOSIL and the resources that were available, and I really importantly needed to know which teachers in my school wanted to be engaged with me and the library. So then I wanted to understand how FOSIL was better than just teaching library skills. This is a question that I have grappled with, and I think is probably quite common to many of us who really haven't had the time to embed ourselves in a FOSIL way of thinking. I felt intuitively that FOSIL was better, that this inquiry process was better, but I've really struggled to see how I work with that. I've been thinking about this today as I've listened to this morning's presentation. I think I'm missing something about inquiry as process, and how the skills fit into that, and that's definitely something I'm still needing, still working on, and with the support of the FOSIL community, thinking about. I understand that it's a complete set of skills, that the relationships are mapped out so that the students are following through this research process, and it helps them understand the purpose and the application of these skills much better. I understand that to carry out an inquiry using a system like FOSIL, your skills are embedded into your learning, and that's exactly what I wanted to do. I'd arrived at interview at Tonbridge Grammar School and said, I don't want to teach library lessons, I want to embed those skills into the curriculum. And it was that way that I began to find my way into inquiry. So one of the other questions I wanted to ask myself was what I would like FOSIL to look like in my school. We've seen heroic inquiry, and it's truly embedded in at Blanchland. I think if that's fair to say, don't feel as though I'm in a position to do that at Tonbridge Grammar School. While, as you'll see, we are an inquiry-based school. I need to know where I'm going on this journey at the moment in the stage I am. And I think what I would like to get to a point of is that we are all using the same terminology. We're using this inquiry cycle terminology throughout school, and we're supporting students to understand their place in the process. So with that in mind, the next wonder question I had was, how am I going to engage the school community? Primarily the teachers, because with them I can then take the students with me, and it's through conversation. It's through being the person who always says, I might be able to help with that. That sounds interesting. I benefit hugely when teachers bring their classes into the library. They think they're using the space. They don't realise that I'm listening at all times and trying to find a way in, and a way that I can go back to them afterwards and say, you were doing this, how about I can support you in that way? And this is the part of the inquiry cycle that you're talking about, in my opinion, when you say, go away and do some research, which is what they always say. And the final question I needed to wonder was, what were my obstacles? My primary obstacle is time, as is everybody's. I'm a sole librarian in a school of 1,000+ students. It's not the only hat I wear in the school, so there are all sorts of things that pull on my time. Teacher engagement is the other key thing. I'm, as I mentioned, very aware that I'm not a teacher. I don't have that pedagogical background, and maybe I feel that harder than they do, but that's certainly something that I wonder about. So investigate. Having listened to Daryl this morning talk about a change in the description of this investigate, I'm interested to hear what he was saying about those of us in IB schools and whether we prefer to stick with this iteration or whether we prefer to move on. I think I like his new iteration, I have to say, but I need to ponder it further, I think. So for me, in this particular inquiry that I'm running through with you today, my investigate stage is where was I going to find the answers to those questions that I had wondered. And these are the places I looked. Ideal School Libraries is a document available from the IB. I have to say, I hear what people are saying about you can teach through inquiry in non-IB schools. But for those of us in IB schools, it's such a gift. And IB education is something that I had no understanding of before I worked at Tonbridge Grammar School, before I really began to think about education and inquiry and all of those things. Inquiry is something so central. I would agree with Daryl that not all teachers are teaching it the way we might hope. But it seems to me that the link between FOSIL and the IB is vital and kind of natural. So I began to look at what the IB thought the librarians should do, and you can see here that they talk about this more expansive idea, inquiry being more expansive than research. They have really got a clear understanding of what they think inquiry is. And it was through that I began to investigate Barbara's work on the Empire Continuum and came to FOSIL and thought, oh, it turns out people have been here before me, and what I think isn't really particularly new and exciting. So just to look at the the IB's Ideal Libraries document, I've taken out a couple of quotes here. You can see that they anticipate the library and the librarian as central to inquiry. And I felt that, and I still feel, this puts me in a really strong position in our school. And it's, as I say, the reason I enjoy working and would seek to work with IB schools. Daryl is demonstrating that it's more than possible to do this outside an IB system, but the comfort of it for me is definitely there. Okay, this next slide looks daunting, and frankly is daunting for me. I needed to understand how I could integrate what the IB calls approaches to learning. You'll see here the description of approaches to learning. They are the skills, really, that the IB would like their students to leave school with. They permeate all of their programs, so the primary years program, the middle years program, and either the diploma or the careers program. Certainly at NYP, the IB is not content-based. It's really skills-based, and that's often what I say to the students when they're even in the diploma and they're looking at their extended essay, the IB's equivalent of EPQ. I try and express to them the importance of the skills. An extended essay, the assessment of an extended essay is really about the skills that you have learned, not about the content that you are putting into it. And so our school, not surprisingly, is focused on these approaches to learning, ATLs as we call them. And I have been trying to build on Daryl's approach, which was to map the ATLs into FOSIL. So you will see these extracts from what is a very long Excel document trying to allow me to do this mapping process, to see where the skills that we feel are so important to teach our students, where they sit in the inquiry cycle. And then from that, working through the skills sets that Daryl has put on his slides, on the FOSIL group website, so that I can see, okay, if I want to teach this particular ATL, referencing, for example, it's going to sit within this strand of fossil, and at year 7 it should look like this, or at year 8 it should look like that, and I can follow the process through. You'll see, if you look very closely, that the colours on the right-hand side of the table as you're looking at it, these are the fossil colours. And the darker colour down this side is the IB group within which the skills sit. So here we're looking at thinking skills, and you'll see that those thinking skills sit in a variety of parts of the inquiry process. And it's that mapping, it's supporting the teachers to move from this clustering that the IB have built into the clustering that I think is more natural in the inquiry cycle, which is what I am working on and have been working on since 2019. I have to say that when I tell you that time is very much a challenge for me, this has been on my appraisal document as an ongoing item for a number of years. So the next thing I was looking at were IFLA school guidelines. The more I read about it, I'm not going to read this out to you. You can see, and if you know the IFLA school guidelines, you really will understand the importance they place on inquiry and on the value of the library to the school curriculum. The more I read, the more interested I became in it, and the more it confirmed my view that this was what I wanted the role to be, the library's role at Tonbridge Grammar School to be, and my role as a librarian to be. So I did mention earlier, our school is teaching through inquiry. The shots I've got on the screen are 2 shots from TODL, which is the school's learning management system. It's a system used by lots of IB schools. And you can see these are 2 year 7 units from 2 different subjects, from design, I think, and from English. And you can see here that the inquiry statement is in the central part of the screen, and the related inquiry questions are shown on the right-hand side. It's important for you to understand, it was important for me to understand that our school feels itself to be an inquiry school. And yet at the moment, I still sit slightly to the side or outside of this process. So what do I add? How can I get into this, more embedded into this in our school? So, construct. That's where I feel I am able to reach in to show the school what it is that FOSIL is doing that's supporting what we do about inquiry. But it's still underway for me. I'm still trying to transform what I know and I'm learning about FOSIL into knowledge which I can embed in the school. I showed part of the process earlier, which is this mapping of the ATLs, working with our IB coordinators, both at diploma and NYP level, and our assistant head who's responsible for teaching and learning. I'm trying to understand how far we can take FOSIL in school, what the barriers are to embedding it. But I'm constantly aware that we have 75 plus members of staff. A lot of staff have been there a long time and are well established in their teaching methods and their unit planning, and there isn't enough time. There's not enough time for me to be involved in their developing of work. There's not enough time for them to develop their work, and there's not enough time for me to develop my thinking. A day like this, where I can really focus on FOSIL, is a real pleasure and a joy for me. So my construct is definitely still underway, proving that this is not a linear process. This is certainly something I'm jumping backwards and forwards with. So really the meat and veg of my presentation today is the express. It's what I was asked to talk about. the particular projects that I have been involved in Tonbridge Grammar School. So what I'm talking about really are two particular projects. A referencing piece of work that I've carried out with Year 7, and there is that teaching an individual skill, but you'll see how I'm trying to use FOSIL to do that and trying to teach them its place in the FOSIL cycle. And then a larger project with Year 12, and it's an induction project which the whole of Year 12 take at the beginning when they join us. I worked on this with Elizabeth through her masterclass program to build it, to work out what it looked like, and it was a huge benefit to me to have that support, to have somebody to talk it through with, but also to ask me those questions, to prompt me to think clearly about it. So I'm going to look at each of these projects in turn. I didn't want to walk through the whole of this Year 7 unit with you. I've just given you these 4 slides. Really, I'm going to talk you through the project, but it's just to give you something to look at, to see the kind of way that I've approached it. This is a project that I have changed, I think, every year since I joined, and I've been teaching the skill of referencing and citation, or at least introducing the skill of referencing and citation to Year 7 at roughly this point in the year. We're about to run this immediately after half term. I've been doing this for 5, 6 plus years now. Every year I change it slightly. There's been a change of department, so this year, so that has given it an extra twist. But it sits as part of our introduction to academic integrity. Interestingly, as a sideline, this whole approach to academic integrity is being reviewed because of the influence of AI and the rubbing up of AI and academic integrity, the other AI, against each other in school. And therefore, when we teach these skills, is becoming into question again. Sorry, there's an aside. So this year, this project, I wanted to see whether I could teach inquiry skills using an inquiry model. So the inquiry skill I was teaching, the particular skill is referencing and citation, and I wanted to see whether I could work my way through it using the inquiry cycle. I have 1 hour to teach Year 7 this skill. So I see each of our 6 Year 7 classes, but only for an hour. This is my opportunity to serve them some FOSIL, to give them a chance to see what this is about. In a school where, as I say, we're not using this language, although they are familiar with the idea of inquiry. So I am going to work the students through these steps. Students are asked to connect with the wider issue of academic integrity. I need to embed referencing within this broader idea before I explain that we're focusing on it. And I need them to think about, so they're going to be connecting with, what do they think this definition is? What's the purpose of it? And what is included in this idea of academic integrity? We're going to do this as a group. I only have an hour. I need this to be a conversational connection. And sadly, that is the way with this. It's not a free inquiry because of my time constraints. And it may be that that's something that other people have comment on, no doubt, but the way I'm planning it at the moment is this. Their wonder is, why does referencing matter? What would referencing look like? So that they're thinking about these 2 particular questions. I want them to go into this trying with that in mind. It's really important, particularly with AI. I keep trying to explain to the AI working party at school that from a library point of view, from a librarian's point of view, teaching AI skills is nothing new. This is just teaching about academic integrity. And so it's vital that students think about, why does this matter? And what would, when we're thinking about referencing, what does a good reference look like in order for me to demonstrate academic integrity? So I give them this definition of academic integrity, and it's very broad. We discuss it. We talk about what sorts of things might fit into this idea, the breadth of it, leading right from not copying your friend's homework to carefully citing your research and carrying out your research from good academic, not academic sources, but from copyright-free sources. So their investigation is going to be looking at the terminology that they need to understand. We have a player referencing game, player terminology game, where we discuss the words, literally the terms that they need to understand to learn Harvard referencing, which is our school's standard. And they're looking at the different sources required, what they require, to reference the different sources. It's an open discussion. That's not ideal. I would much rather they had time to go away, play with these different sources. They will have things on their desk. They will have newspapers. They will have books. They will have journals in groups, and they'll be looking at them and we'll be talking about it. But we are very time limited. The construct stage of their inquiry is going to be working together to create this table of requirements you can see here in the bottom corner, looking at the most commonly referenced sources for them and drawing their knowledge together, thinking about listening to each other, thinking about what the differences are between these sources and why sometimes you need some information and not others. The express stage of their inquiry is going to be for them to attempt to reference the work that they do. They are given, this is a formative assessment for them, they're given a piece of work, and the question is, why is X a global problem? They're given a list of global problems, they can choose theirs, and they're asked to go away and investigate that problem, and then I think they're asked to create a PowerPoint presentation about it, which they will be expected to cite. There are two important things. I spend a lot of time stressing to them that this is a skill that they are not going to learn in an hour, that we will be revisiting throughout the next 5 years of their time with us at Tonbridge Grammar School, and that they are starting today, and that we are not expecting perfection from them at this stage. What we are expecting them to do is to act in an honest way, so to make a good attempt, bearing in mind the information that they have, and to keep building on that. As a slight aside, I have taken the opportunity to integrate Search Coach, which is a part of Teams. You can set in the back of your Teams channel Search Coach, where you can force students effectively to search using a particular group of websites. You can see that they're looking at global issues, so I have chosen websites which I feel are accessible to them, but give them a good level of content, a good level of academic resource, which isn't too difficult for Year 7, but will challenge them. There are two reasons for this. I wanted it to be easy for us to look at from an assessment point of view. So when we're asking students to put in citations, we've only got 6 websites that we're looking at. So it's much easier for us to assess whether they have accurately or made an accurate attempt to cite. They are asked to use a book as well, for which they have free rein. They can go away and look at. But I also wanted to rein Year 7 in from the problem that we often experience, which is this really wide use of the internet, and give them an opportunity to really experience some websites which possibly had a bit more depth than those they might clearly find. So the reflect stage of this inquiry for me is going to be has this worked? For the students, I want them to think about what have they learned, what have they learned about integrity, about academic integrity, and what have they learned about referencing, and how that's going to enable them to move forward, what that might look like in other subjects. Okay, so our Year 12 project. This is the one I worked on with Elizabeth. It ran for the first time this year. It's a much larger project. It runs across a month, and with a similar size cohort of students, slightly smaller group because it's Year 12, and with a vastly broader scope, really. I wasn't focusing on a particular skill. My purpose of this project was to teach students how to research thoroughly rather than diving straight in. Our students come from GCSE, whether they've been with us in the years before they joined sixth form or whether they've been at another school. And as we know, GCSE is very content driven. They are used to the teachers giving them a question and they go away and answer it. And so my experience has been with our sixth form that they tend to look for a question and then answer it. I've supported a lot of students through their extended essays, and regularly the problem that I have come across is that they have found a question and sought to answer it, rather than allowing the questions to arise out of their reading, where they are therefore able to discover that there is information to answer or things to provoke thought into those questions. Often, if they come to me with a question, it's unanswerable because there simply isn't the material, or we don't have the access to the material. So I really wanted them to slow down their research. The sixth form team wanted students to make better use of a program of software that we have called My Supercurricular. It's a package we subscribe to which allows students to investigate supercurricular experiences, articles, work experience, podcasts, MOOCs on a huge variety of subjects. They're encouraging students to use it as part of their university application, but also because we believe in this rounded student. We wanted to demonstrate that students who join the diploma are about more than than the collection of the subjects that they do. They are a rounded person, and those subjects are all related by an interest. So, how was I going to go about this? I was given these interesting days. I was given a taster day, an hour on the induction day, a number of form time sessions, which are about 20 minutes each over the month. And I had the whole of September for them to cover for them to complete this piece of independent research. I didn't have very much delivery time, therefore. The students who turned up on the taster day were not going to be guaranteed to turn up on the induction day. The induction day was day 1 or day 2 of the students being in school. I was trying to teach them talk to them about a set of ideas, about some major piece of work. They had only just joined the school. They were quite focused on making friends. They were quite focused on finding their way. They were excited about being part of the sixth form. There were various challenges that I had to overcome. My thinking was that this was a great time to do this kind of project. They were all new, they would all be enthusiastic, and they didn't have too much homework to do at this stage. Their view was slightly different. I wanted them to take time. I wanted them to approach this really slowly. What I talked to them about was that this was only connect, the wonder, and the investigate stages of an inquiry cycle. There was to be no express, which seems counterintuitive, and I have to say, I think is the thing that I found most difficult to explain to the students. My aim was to teach them about the process of research. I wanted them to focus on these early stages, to stop them starting with a question and then working back to answer it. In order for the questions to arise out of the text, I wanted them very much to connect first. So what they were asked to do, was to go away to look at my super curricula, and if they couldn't find anything, they were welcome to use other places like TED Talks or Gresham College or newspapers. I wanted them to find anything that sparked their interest. I didn't mind whether it was connected to their IB subject or not, just something that sparked their interest. I asked them initially to think of 3 or 4 ideas, and you can see this chart this map that I've put here on the screen. This was my example. So here I am in the middle. I went away and looked through my super curricula, and I thought, okay, I've got this. There's something interesting about borders and conflicts, about where geographical borders and the wars and the conflicts that they give rise to. There's something interesting about dissent and climate change. I'd recently watched a program about when it's okay, when civil disobedience is okay, in order to protest against something you feel strongly about. I thought that was an interesting idea. I was interested in the graphical representation of data. I was interested in the ethical questions about AI and ecology, the quantity of water and power required to run AI. So those were my kind of starting out points. I found things about them, and I wanted the students to follow this kind of example, to go away, see what they could find, see where information was, and kind of spider their research out. We spent time looking at quite a lot of resources. I particularly like Carrot 2. I've put a little note down here. I'm not going to try and share and click that link now because I fear I may never get back to my presentation. But if you haven't investigated Carrot 2, it's a resource. I spend a lot of time with our students promoting free research websites. We don't subscribe to anything. We don't subscribe to JSTOR. We don't subscribe to any journals, either online or in paper. And therefore, I'm really trying to focus my students on finding the very best information that they can free. I often encourage them to use Carrot 2 because of the way it helps you do exactly this, which is to carry out a sort of spidering of your research. It's a search engine. Unlike Google, when it shows you the results, you can ask it to display them in a tree form so that it's showing you the relationships between between the results. So it's looking for keywords and it's saying the following groups of articles have that keyword a number of times. And the students find that a very useful way to see the connections in their research. So I spend a lot of time doing that kind of thing.
Ruth, you've got just over 5 minutes.
Thank you. I need to speed up, sorry. Okay, so the issues with this project were that they found it very amorphous. They needed something more concrete. What I ended up doing was building this chart for them to say, okay, I want you to do this step, do that step, do that step. Okay, I want you to go away. I want you to find these resources, and I want you to look at the way your research connects. What they were really aiming at in the end was this presentation. They were asked to present using these the terminology on here. These are ATLs. These are the approaches to learning that the IB wants them to talk about, wants us to teach them, and the colours are showing you where they sit in the fossil cycle. I wanted them to reflect on the research that they had carried out in this format, so that they were able to, so they were asked to do no more than tell me about their research. I didn't want them to tell me what conclusion they'd come to. I didn't need them to draw a conclusion. The students found that really, really difficult to understand, and that's certainly something that I have reflected on and will be thinking about when I run this project again. I'm really keen to run it again next year, but I think it needs a change in form, and I probably need some further thinking and some further support to make it really successful. But I really it's through FOSIL, it's through this thinking, this slowing down of my thinking, that I've been able to really understand and support the students to do this at all. I was given a huge degree of autonomy with this project and a lot of support from the sixth form, but I did have to rely on form teachers to give a lot of presentations about particular skills. So researching, I made presentations which were shown in form time and needed the support of form teachers to discuss them. That's, again, is a time constraint for me with such a large group in such a small amount of time. Okay, so reflection. I'm always learning. I'm always reconstructing my work and my understanding. The Year 7 project that I talked about has been substantially tweaked. The Year 12 project will need change. You can see where it kind of works, where my thinking works, but I'm very conscious that the students were floundering, were feeling as though they weren't sure of where they were going with it. I'm interested, as they are now midpoint in their extended essay process, whether, and I can't ask them yet because they are midpoint, but whether actually reflecting back on that project that they did at the beginning of the year, they are now able to see a benefit to it that they couldn't see when they were doing it. In which case that will help me inform my work going forward next year, thinking about that project and how we can run it better. So how am I going to take this journey forward? As I said, the school is teaching through inquiry, but I think I'm very much remain peripheral to it, sadly. It's viewed as a teaching project, and despite my having shared FOSIL, I think it wasn't, and I wasn't part of the September inset when inquiry was a focus for the teaching staff. Interestingly, the school seems to be working using cycles that you can see here that look very, very similar to FOSIL, but are different in each department. I mean, we've looked today at 3 or 4 cycles, and one of my questions about this whole situation is, where can we get to a unifying point? Because the cycle on the left here, on the left of the screen here, is that provided by the IB, primarily used for the primary years program. And the cycle on the right here is a design cycle used by the IB design teachers to talk about inquiry. They feel like different iterations of the same thing, frustratingly similar iterations of the same thing, and yet none of them look like, none of them are FOSIL in our school. Recent conversation with our assistant head was that they think that it would be useful to have this unifying terminology in the school, but it's a mountain to climb and not a small one. And that maybe I needed to start working with a particular group of subjects, one of the IB groups, and do it that way, work up a group at a time. That, in a way, is a really exciting prospect for me. But at the same time, I have to say I find slightly disheartening that all of this is going on. And I kind of feel as though I'm talking to the wrong person. I think that if FOSIL is going to become the norm, while librarians are definitely the people to drive it in schools, we're not the ones to be in the driving seat of that educationally. I think, for me, if it came from the IB itself, that would be amazing. And if it came from UK policymakers, it would be amazing. My concern is that those voices are not in this conversation. I feel very passionate about this. I feel that this is the way to go. I can only see, and that's reflected in the fact that our school is teaching through inquiry. There are these 2 inquiry cycles, and there are others being used around the school. I really would look forward to it being this unified terminology. This FOSIL seems to be clearly, to me, an opportunity for us all to take part in something really exciting educationally, but certainly for our school to do so.
Thank you so much. How's that? past exactly. Well done, Ruth. Thank you so much. There was one question, but I will leave that one to go to the FOSIL group, and it can be answered later, or you could answer it in the chat box if you feel you have the time. Thank you so much. I have to move on. So